I'd like to tell a story about a woman, a student of ours, started out as a client, became a student, now is a facilitator. And before I do that, Bert used to talk about you do a constellation and you leave it up to the soul. You don't repeat the constellation. Well, one of the things that Jamy and I have learned over the years of doing this work is that it's okay to repeat a constellation. Sometimes it takes a long time. Tell this story, and it's her story, but it's a familiar story to all of us, or to many of us. She experienced sexual abuse in her childhood. And so she came to do a constellation, and what's the issue? I experienced sexual abuse. So in that first constellation, she could barely stand 20 feet from the person who abused her in the constellation. All she could do was do the first step of physically entering into the field. But she had courage. She was brave enough to look at the initiation that she experienced in this lifetime, set it up physically, and entered the field. But then, over time, she returned and eventually came through our program, but at different times would do this constellation over and over again. And over time, she would be able to move closer into the mental level and begin to remember the things that happened. But just stand there and hold in the field and allow the mental level to heal. And then eventually move closer, physically moving across the field through the emotional levels and allowing the emotions to move through her. And eventually, over time, she was able to stand in the Vesica Pisces, the overlapping of the two energy fields, moving through the mental level, through the emotional level, and standing there. And eventually shifting into the spiritual understanding of why this happened, why she agreed to this. And she could then her consciousness began to expand to the point where she understood that it wasn't her alone, but that this has been going on transgenerationally. And it's also part not just of her family soul, of the collective of her family soul, but it happened transgenerationally over the generations, and it also was part of her culture. And it became this larger healing between the masculine and feminine. And again, tomorrow when Jamy and I speak on healing the collective masculine and feminine, she was able to understand it and hold it from this larger field of consciousness and see the interconnectedness, the transgenerational interconnectedness of her place in healing the separation between the masculine and feminine, and between the feminine and the feminine, because we all know there's a kind of a collusion that often happens, and between her and the masculine in general. And over time, over several constellations, she was able to reach this place of being able to integrate it inside of herself. So now as a facilitator, when she facilitates, we talk, and sometimes she'll joke and say, when people would come to my seminars and a woman or a man would speak about abuse, I couldn't handle this. Now she laughs and she realizes, I can handle this. And she can help every man, every woman heal this collective wound of sexual abuse because she did her work over and over and over again in constellations. I actually consider her a bit of a master in this because of her own authority. Her authority of claiming what she experienced in her family lineage, part of the collective of the masculine and feminine. And now she has no reservations about standing there with somebody else, a victim or a perpetrator, leading them through the levels of consciousness, through the three-stage process of acknowledging, accepting, and agreeing. Helping that person cross the bridge through the lower emotions to the higher emotions and get to the level of soul awareness where she can understand, or he can understand, how this was part of a larger healing for all of humanity. That's the potential of our work. That's what we can do with family constellations.